A quiet village ends where the whispering woods begin. This border, the very edge of settlement, is where humanity's oldest fears take shape. Cultures across the world tell eerily similar stories about shape-shifting spirits that haunt these boundaries, beings that can change their form and their intentions. Why are these elusive entities almost always found lingering at the periphery, in the space between the hearth fire and the absolute unknown? This journey will uncover the hidden psychological and social reasons these myths persist, revealing what they tell us about fear, community, and our own minds. You will discover the universal human truths encrypted in these ancient tales. We will explore why the most potent mysteries thrive in the margins and what these fluid beings say about our own rigid sense of self. What part of the human experience do you think is most reflected in these stories of things that change at the border? This border was more than just a fence or a wall. It was the ultimate threshold, a place where the world you knew intimately gave way to a world you could only guess at. Think of it as the line drawn in the sand, not just to keep the wild out, but to define what it meant to be inside. This is the concept of the edge of settlement, a universal idea found across human cultures. For the ancient Romans, it was the limes, a fortified frontier that marked the end of Roman law and the beginning of barbarian lands. In countless European villages, it was the hedgerow or the old stone wall, a physical marker everyone understood, but its power was not just in its physical presence. This edge was a profound psychological barrier. On one side was order, community, and safety. On the other was chaos, the unknown, and danger. This was the space where the rules of society grew thin and flexible. It was a practical zone, a place for activities that were necessary but did not belong at the heart of the community. It was where you might meet traders from distant lands, people who carried stories and goods from beyond the known world. It was also a place of exile where those who broke sacred laws were cast out. The garbage pits were often here, and just beyond them, the burial grounds. This mingling of the everyday with the profound, the refuse of life resting near the memorials for those who had passed, created a deeply liminal atmosphere. It was a betwixt and between place, neither fully civilized nor entirely wild, and it is precisely this ambiguous, in-between quality that makes it the perfect stage for the shapeshifter. A being that defies categories, that is neither one thing nor the other, naturally finds its home in a space that is itself undefined. The spirit of the threshold reflects the nature of the threshold itself, fluid and uncontained. This fluid nature is perfectly embodied by the trickster at the gate. A being like Loki from Norse tales does not fit neatly into any category of god or monster. He is a boundary crosser by his very essence, moving freely between the realms of the gods, the world of humanity, and the lands of the giants. His home is not at the center of any court but in the spaces between, and his greatest power is his ability to change his shape, his allegiance, and even the truth itself. This makes him a constant source of disruption. He challenges the rigid order of the gods, sometimes with clever solutions that save them, other times with deceptions that bring them to the brink of ruin. He is not purely evil, but he is fundamentally chaotic. The trickster exists to test the limits. He confronts travelers with riddles at a crossroads, not merely to be cruel, but to see if their wits are sharp enough to proceed. He breaks social taboos, forcing a community to confront its own unspoken rules. In doing so, he delivers a profound and unsettling message. The certainty we build inside our settled lives is in many ways an illusion. The world beyond the edge is unpredictable, and the trickster is its ambassador. His presence at the border signifies that the greatest challenges to our worldview, the ideas that force us to adapt and grow, often come from the margins. They come from the ambiguous figure who asks a question we never thought to ask, forcing us to reconsider what we held as permanently true. This necessary chaos, however, has a far darker and more dangerous cousin waiting in those same shadows. But the trickster's playful chaos is only one side of the coin. In the deep shadows of that same forest, a far more formidable presence waits. This second archetype is the Guardian, a shape-shifting spirit that serves not to test the rules but to enforce them. The Slavic Leshy is a perfect example. This ancient forest spirit was a master of form, capable of growing as tall as the oldest pines or shrinking down to hide among the moss. It was not merely a resident of the woods, it was their protector, a person who entered the forest to hunt or gather without showing proper respect, perhaps by whistling or speaking a sacred name aloud, might find themselves hopelessly lost, led in circles by a voice that sounded like a loved one, or confronted by a beast that was not quite a wolf and not quite a bear. The Leshy's shapeshifting was a direct expression of the wilderness it embodied. Nature itself is not a single thing. It is both the gentle glade and the violent storm, the providing berry bush and the stalking predator. The Leshy's fluid form was a constant, visible reminder of this encompassing and unpredictable power. It was a guardian of the boundary in the most literal sense, punishing those who crossed from the village into the wild with arrogance or greed. This archetype appears across the globe. In Japan, the kitsune or fox spirit often guarded the shrines and territories of certain deities, and its ability to shift into human form was a sign of its sacred connection and power. These entities are not chaotic, they are the law. Their presence at the edge of settlement enforces a critical, unspoken agreement. The safety of the community is not a given. It is a precarious state that depends entirely on respecting the forces that dwell beyond the firelight. To venture out was to accept terms, and the shape-shifting guardian was the living embodiment of those terms, a permanent warning that the wild was not a resource to be plundered, but a power to be acknowledged. This deep-seated need to personify the threat of the unknown points directly toward something fundamental within the human mind itself. This psychological need to give form to our fears runs deep. When our ancestors looked into the darkness beyond their fires, they were not just seeing an absence of light. They were confronting everything that lay outside their understanding and control. The wilderness was the source of sudden illness, the home of predators, and the direction from which rival groups might emerge. It represented the ultimate unknown. And the human mind has a powerful tendency to fill voids, especially threatening ones, with intention. By imagining an intelligent, shape-shifting spirit in that space, we transform a diffuse, impersonal threat into something with a face and a mind. This makes the danger comprehensible. You cannot negotiate with a concept like misfortune, but you can attempt to bargain with a spirit. You cannot outwit a stroke of bad luck, but you can use cleverness to deceive a trickster. This act of personification is a fundamental coping mechanism. It takes the vast, chaotic terror of the unknown and shrinks it down to a scale we can grapple with. The specific quality of shapeshifting speaks directly to our most profound anxieties about deception. The true horror is not the monster you see coming from a mile away. It is the threat that can wear a friendly face, the danger that can mimic a loved one's voice to lure you from the path. This reflects a very real human fear of betrayal, of not being able to trust the world immediately around you. Psychologically, this process is a form of projection. We take our own internal collective anxieties, our worries about sickness, conflict, and scarcity, and we project them outward onto a supernatural other. This externalization serves a crucial social function. By creating a common enemy at the gate, these myths strengthen the bonds within the community. The message is clear: the world out there is treacherous and deceptive. Our safety depends on sticking together, on trusting each other, and on maintaining the order within our walls. The shapeshifter becomes a dark reflection of everything the community fears, a collective nightmare given form to reinforce the collective dream of security and belonging. But what happens when the line between that external monster and our own internal nature begins to blur? This shared fear, however terrifying, forged a powerful kind of social glue. The unsettling stories told around the hearth did more than just scare listeners. They actively sculpted the community's identity. By creating a common enemy in the shape-shifting spirit at the edge, these myths drew a bright, psychological line between us and them. Conformity to the group's rules was not merely about politeness, it became a matter of survival. Straying too far from the village, or worse, challenging its core beliefs, was an invitation for the thing in the woods to take notice. This is vividly seen in the lore of the Navajo skinwalker, a malevolent being with the power to wear the skins of animals. Belief in this entity was deeply intertwined with cultural taboos. To even speak of it carelessly was considered dangerous. This fear enforced a strict code of conduct, reinforcing that group loyalty and adherence to tradition were the ultimate protections against a predatory, deceptive world. An individual tempted to act against the community's interests would think twice, knowing the stories. The myth transformed abstract social rules into a tangible, life or death consequence. This external threat made internal cooperation and trust not just a good idea, but an absolute necessity. In this way, these ancient tales functioned as a subtle but powerful form of social engineering, binding people together with the shared project of keeping the darkness at bay. But this need for explanation went beyond just policing social behavior. It also reached into the very heart of the natural world, seeking to make sense of its most frightening and unpredictable events. These stories were humanity's first attempt at a scientific model. Before the age of microscopes and weather satellites, the world was filled with phenomena that defied easy explanation. A prized goat vanishes without a trace, a strange cough spreads through a family, a barn inexplicably catches fire. For a community living at the mercy of nature, these events were not just misfortunes, they were profound mysteries demanding an answer. Mythology provided that answer, offering a coherent, if supernatural, framework. The elusive nature of the shapeshifter was the perfect explanation for problems with no visible cause. In Japan, when a mysterious blue flame was seen before a fire, or when a person began acting completely out of character, the blame often fell upon the kitsune. This fox spirit's ability to transform and deceive explained why the source of the trouble was so frustratingly hard to pin down. It was not a random accident, it was the work of a cunning, intelligent agent. This attribution gave people a course of action. They could leave offerings to appease the spirit or perform rituals to drive it away. This created a crucial sense of agency in a world that often felt uncontrollable. Assigning intention to misfortune is a profound psychological comfort. It transforms a senseless tragedy into a story with a character, a motive, and most importantly, a potential resolution. You cannot reason with bad weather, but you can negotiate with a spirit believed to control the storms. The myth becomes a tool for navigating life's inherent chaos, a way to impose a narrative on the random and the frightening. This early system of explanation, built around the shapeshifter at the edge, was a vital step in our relationship with the world. It was a way to ask why, long before we had the tools to find a physical answer. And as our settlements grew from villages into cities, this foundational relationship with the unknown would be tested in entirely new ways. This perfect symbolic mirroring reveals a fundamental truth about how we process the unknown. The shapeshifter is not just a monster that lives at the edge. It is the very idea of the edge given a body and a mind. Both are liminal, a word that simply means being on a threshold, caught in the process of crossing from one state to another. The borderland is a space of transition between the village and the wild, between the known and the unknowable. In the same way, the shapeshifter is a creature of transition, forever moving between forms, between animal and human, between friend and foe. It is a being without a fixed identity, living in a place without a fixed definition. This resonance between the creature and its habitat is what gives these myths their deep, unsettling power. The ambiguity of the location amplifies the ambiguity of the being. You cannot get a clear look at the spirit because the space itself refuses to be clearly defined. The shifting shadows of the forest perfectly match the shifting form of the entity within it. This symbolic pairing points toward a profound human intuition that the most significant changes, the most potent mysteries, and the most dangerous possibilities do not reside in the comfortable center of things. They ferment in the margins, in the spaces between what we have decided is real. This concept becomes vividly clear in specific cultural figures. Think of the Celtic puka, a creature known throughout Ireland and Wales. This spirit was the ultimate embodiment of the liminal. It was a shapeshifter, most often appearing as a dark, powerful horse with glowing eyes, but it could also take the form of a goat, a dog, or even a human. And where was it encountered, almost without fail, at a crossroads, on a lonely stretch of road between villages, or at the very boundary fence of a farm? The puka did not live deep in the wilderness or in the heart of the town. It existed in the journey itself, in the space between destinations. Its behavior was just as ambiguous. A ride from the puka could be a terrifying, chaotic experience that left a person shaken and lost, or it could be a wild, enlightening journey that revealed hidden truths about the land. The puka was not good or evil. It was a force of the in-between, and its nature depended entirely on the context of the encounter and the attitude of the human involved. It was chaos and wisdom intertwined, a perfect reflection of the transitional space it called home. This symbolic link between the liminal being and the liminal space is a key that unlocks a deeper layer of meaning in these global myths, showing us that our ancestors were not just telling scary stories, they were mapping the very architecture of human fear and fascination. Medieval Europe built its walls high, but its forests grew taller still. Just beyond the stone and mortar, in the deep woods that pressed against every settlement, two powerful figures watched from the leaves. The wild man was a vision of raw, untamed power, a being covered in thick hair, often depicted wielding a crude wooden club. He was not a distant monster, but a direct reflection of humanity's own forgotten past, a primal self that civilization had worked for centuries to suppress. He lived where the plowed fields ended, a permanent resident of the shadowy fringe, reminding everyone that the animal within was only ever a few steps away. His constant presence at the border reinforced a critical, unsettling idea. The conquest of nature was never truly complete, and the wild could reclaim both the land and the human heart at any moment. Alongside him dwelled the Green Man, a more enigmatic but equally pervasive spirit. His face, carved into cathedral walls and peering from wooden beams, was not a face of flesh but of foliage, with leaves and vines sprouting from his mouth and eyes. He was the embodiment of the forest's life force, a symbol of nature's endless cycle of growth, decay, and rebirth. This force was not always gentle. It could be as suffocating and relentless as the tangled undergrowth. Together, these two beings represented the dual soul of the wilderness just beyond the gate, both the terrifying brutality of the untamed and the awe-inspiring power of regeneration. They were shapeshifters not in the sense of changing from a wolf to a man, but in their fluid representation of the transforming seasons and the landscape itself. The Green Man's leafy face changed with the spring bloom and the autumn fall, while the wild man's strength echoed the harshness of winter and the fertility of summer. Their placement at the very edge of town was a masterstroke of symbolic storytelling, visually reinforcing the fragile, constantly negotiated line between the human order of the cultivated field and the chaotic, living power of wild growth. This theme of a nature spirit guarding the threshold was not confined to European woods. On the other side of the world, a strikingly similar guardian watched over a very different landscape. Far from the European woods along the riverbanks of southern Africa, a different kind of guardian tested the boundaries of sleep and safety. The Tokolosh was a creature of profound contradiction, a dwarf-like water spirit known for its childish stature yet capable of bringing very adult nightmares into a home. This entity was more than a simple monster. It was a force of social disruption, often believed to be summoned by those with ill intent to harass entire communities. When livestock fell ill or a person experienced a string of bad luck, the Tokolosh was a ready explanation, a name for the invisible malice that seemed to seep from the edges of the village. Its preferred domain was the riverbank, that vital yet perilous line where solid earth gives way to the fluid and the unseen. Water itself is a classic liminal space, a threshold between worlds that is both life-giving and dangerously opaque, and the Tokolosh was its perfect, malevolent embodiment. This belief was not passive. It inspired one of the most practical and widespread defenses in the mythological world. Families would raise their beds onto bricks, a simple, physical barrier against a supernatural threat. This act was a powerful declaration of control. It transformed abstract fear into a manageable problem with a clear, if humble, solution. The raised bed was a fortress wall built each night, a tangible line of defense that allowed people to rest, believing they had outsmarted the chaos that lurked just beyond their doors. This ritual perfectly illustrates how mythology bridges the gap between the terrifying unknown and the human need for action, turning dread into a problem that could be solved, at least for a few hours, with a stack of bricks. This figure emerges from the deepest shadows of cultural taboo, a human who has crossed a line to become something else entirely. The Navajo Noldlushii, known widely as the Skinwalker, is not a spirit from the wild but a person from within the community who has chosen to embrace a profound darkness. To gain the power to transform into an animal, they must commit an act that violates a sacred law, a transgression so severe it shatters their humanity. This origin makes the Skinwalker uniquely terrifying. The threat is not an external monster, but a corrupted neighbor, someone you might have once trusted. They move through the night on the edges of the reservation, associated with misfortune and a profound sense of dread. Their very existence serves as the ultimate cautionary tale, a powerful deterrent against seeking forbidden knowledge or engaging in malevolent practices. The myth enforces the community's spiritual and moral boundaries with absolute clarity, teaching that some powers are never meant to be touched. This represents a complete perversion of the natural order. Where other cultures might revere an animal as a spiritual guide, the Skinwalker twists that sacred bond, using the form for malice and personal gain. It is a dark inversion of the relationship between humanity and nature, turning a potential source of wisdom into an instrument of fear. This starkly contrasts with the role of shapeshifters in other traditions, where their fluid nature can sometimes serve a more balanced or even protective purpose for the world. Yet the shadows at the edge are not always filled with malice. A different kind of shapeshifter waits in these liminal spaces, one whose purpose is not to punish or deceive but to guide. The giant green form of the Ku Sith in Scottish lore was a spectral guardian, a hound the size of a young cow whose deep, booming barks could be heard across the moors. Its presence was a warning, a living boundary marker that signaled the entrance to a fairy mound, a place where the human world met the other world. To hear its bark 3 times was considered an omen, a call to be heeded. This was not a spirit of random terror, but a custodian of sacred thresholds, its role to keep the unprepared from stumbling into realms they were not ready to face. It was a protector of mysteries, ensuring that only those with the proper intent or courage would cross. This idea of the benevolent tester appears across many traditions. A traveler at a lonely crossroads might encounter an old woman asking for help, or a wounded animal blocking the path. Showing kindness or bravery in this uncertain moment reveals the stranger's true nature, often as a deity or spirit in disguise, and the reward is not gold, but something far more valuable, a piece of ancient wisdom, a blessing for their journey, or a glimpse of their true destiny. These encounters reframe the very nature of the borderland. It is transformed from a place of pure danger into a site of potential initiation. The unknown becomes a teacher. The shapeshifter is the agent of this transformation, a fluid entity that meets us at the point between who we are and who we could become. To pass its test is to be changed, to integrate a lesson from the wild into the ordered self. This is the hidden promise within the fear, that the edge of the world is also the edge of understanding, and that confronting the other can ultimately lead to a deeper knowledge of ourselves. This powerful theme of transformation at the threshold connects these ancient stories directly to one of humanity's most universal rituals. These symbolic trials at the border are far more than simple tests of strength. They follow a deeply ingrained pattern, a narrative blueprint for transformation that mythologists recognize as the hero's journey. The call to adventure almost always pulls the hero away from the comfort of the village and directly into a liminal space, a wilderness or a haunted forest where the normal rules no longer apply. It is here, in this crucible of the unknown, that they inevitably meet the shapeshifter. This encounter is the central ordeal, a moment of supreme uncertainty where the hero cannot rely on brute force alone. They must face a being whose very nature is fluid, a creature of deception and illusion. Consider the spider trickster Anansi, a central figure in West African and Caribbean lore. He is a master of stories and clever ruses, often setting challenges that seem impossible. To outwit him, a hero must think in ways they never have before, to see the world not as a set of rigid rules but as a web of possibilities. Success in this trial is not measured by a slain monster, but by a hard-won piece of wisdom, a stolen secret of fire, or a story that will bring knowledge back to the people. The victory is intellectual and spiritual. By navigating the trickster's chaotic game, the hero integrates a piece of that chaos into themselves, emerging not just as a survivor, but as a more complete and capable individual. They gain the maturity and perspective required to return and lead, to guide their community with the hard-earned insight from beyond the edge. This is why the edge of settlement is so much more than a barrier. It is a transformative threshold. It is the necessary trial that every culture, in its own stories, recognizes as essential for growth. We see this pattern reflected in the most personal chapters of our own lives. The moments that define us, that force us to evolve, are almost always periods of profound transition, our own personal liminal spaces. Leaving home for the first time, starting a new path, or enduring a great personal hardship, these are all journeys to the edge of our own known world. In these times, we confront our own shapeshifters, the forms of fear, doubt, and uncertainty that challenge our old sense of self. Overcoming them requires the same virtues the ancient myths celebrated: courage, cleverness, and integrity. The stories we tell about heroes and spirits are, at their core, a map for navigating the most difficult and necessary passages of a human life, reminding us that the scariest borders often lead to the most important discoveries. The very concept of shapeshifting serves as a profound metaphor for the transformations that define a human life. We all pass through stages where our identity is not fixed, where we are caught between what we were and what we are becoming. Birth, the journey into adulthood, the creation of a new family, and the final passage are all liminal states, periods of profound personal change. The ancient myths of fluid, changing spirits externalize this deeply internal and often unsettling experience. Consider the story of the werewolf. Its violent, involuntary transformation under the full moon can be read as a powerful dramatization of puberty. The sudden surge of unfamiliar strength, the emergence of raw emotions that feel alien and uncontrollable, the sense of becoming a different person overnight, these are all mirrored in the curse of the wolfman. The community's fear of the creature reflects a very real, ancient anxiety about the disruptive power of a new generation coming into its own. By placing these transformative tales at the physical edge of the village, our ancestors performed a remarkable act of narrative containment. They symbolically moved the turbulence of personal change to a safe distance. The chaotic energy of adolescence, the redefining of roles in marriage, the mystery of death, all were projected onto the shapeshifter lingering in the borderlands. This strategy allowed the community to acknowledge the power of these transitions without allowing their disruptive potential to unravel the social order at its center. It was a way of mapping the human spirit's own difficult journeys onto the geography of the world, creating a spiritual landscape where every personal crisis had a place and, in a way, a guardian. This externalization of our inner transformations reveals a deep, psychological truth about how we process the very nature of change itself. This sacred map was drawn not on parchment, but directly onto the land itself. At the very heart of the village stood the temple, the longhouse, or the sacred hearthfire, a point of absolute spiritual order. Here, the gods of the home and community held sway, deities of the harvest, the family, and social bonds. Their power was dependable, their rituals predictable, but as you moved outward step by step, the spiritual landscape shifted. The tidy gardens at the village perimeter were watched over by different spirits, those of the cultivated soil. Beyond them, in the wild meadows and the deep woods, the rules changed entirely. This was the domain of the shapeshifters, the tricksters, and the guardians, beings of pure potential and profound unpredictability. The edge of settlement was not merely a fence line, it was the shimmering interface with the spirit world itself, a realm operating under a completely different set of laws. This cosmological mapping provided an essential guide for daily life. It told people exactly where it was safe to build a new home or clear a field. It defined the hunting grounds where one must whisper a prayer before taking a life, and it marked the ancient groves where no axe should ever fall. The entire physical environment was imbued with spiritual meaning, creating a living geography of the sacred and the profane. This was not superstition. It was a sophisticated organizational principle. By understanding where the unpredictable spirits dwelled, a community could navigate its world with both practical sense and spiritual reverence. The myth became a survival manual, written in the language of the supernatural, teaching a simple, crucial lesson. The further you venture from the center of your known world, the more humility and awareness you must carry with you. That primal map of the sacred and the profane did not disappear when our world became paved with asphalt and lit by screens. The ancient fear of the shapeshifter at the edge has simply shed its animal skin and put on new clothes. The lonely country road at night has become our modern forest path, a ribbon of asphalt stretching between islands of light, a perfect liminal space. Here, the hook-handed man lurking near a parked car or the phantom hitchhiker who vanishes from the back seat are the direct descendants of the puka and the leshy. They are ambiguous figures who appear without warning in a transitional space, delivering a chill of terror that feels both new and deeply ancient. This evolution continues in our most popular horror films. The monster is rarely first seen in full, glaring view. It is a flicker of movement in the background, a distorted face glimpsed for a single frame, or a shadow that darts just beyond the window's edge. The film frame itself becomes the new edge of settlement, with the safe, familiar world of the characters occupying the center and the unknown pressing in from the periphery. This visual language taps directly into the same primal wiring. The threat is not the thing we can confront head-on, but the thing we can only sense, the deceptive presence that exists in the corner of our eye, challenging our perception of a safe and orderly reality. This persistence across millennia is not an accident. We can analyze it through a powerful literary concept known as the uncanny. The uncanny is that uniquely unsettling feeling that arises when something is at once familiar and strangely alien. A doll that blinks, a voice that sounds almost like a loved one's, a reflection in a mirror that moves a second too late. This is the psychological territory of the shapeshifter. It is the fear of the almost human, the nearly real, the thing that has crossed the threshold just enough to trigger our deepest instincts for recognition and revulsion at the same time. The modern monsters that haunt our urban legends and films are masters of the uncanny, and they prove that our psychological need to project our anxieties onto the margins is a permanent feature of the human mind. The edge has moved from the stone wall to the screen's glow, but the fundamental human relationship with the unknown remains beautifully, terrifyingly the same. The foggy streets of Victorian London became the new wilderness, a stone jungle where the ancient fear of the shapeshifter found a fresh hunting ground. Gothic literature seized upon this primal template, placing its most terrifying figures not in distant forests, but in the liminal spaces of the modern world. The mysterious Mr. Hyde does not live in a cave. He emerges from the alleys and doorways just beyond the gaslight's glow, a brutal counterpart to the respectable doctor. Jekyll, he is the ultimate representation of a repressed self, the part of the human psyche that civilized society tries to lock away, proving that the most dangerous border is not the one around the city, but the one within the mind. This theme of the permeable boundary is the very engine of Gothic horror. The vampire, perhaps the most iconic of these figures, cannot enter a home without an invitation. This single, simple rule transforms the domestic threshold into a site of immense psychological power. The safety of the home depends entirely on a conscious act of welcome, a momentary lapse in judgment that allows the outside darkness to seep inside. It is a perfect metaphor for the fragility of social and moral codes, suggesting that corruption does not batter the gates down so much as it is politely ushered in. The settings of these stories are themselves characters, modern versions of the edge of settlement. The haunted castle perched on a windswept cliff and the decaying manor house at the end of a lonely moor are not centers of community. They are isolated outposts, places where the rules of polite society have grown thin and the past presses in with a palpable weight. They are the haunted houses on the hill that every town whispers about, physical manifestations of the margin. The monster in these narratives almost always symbolizes something that the central social order has tried to ignore or suppress. It could be a forbidden desire, a shameful secret, or a forgotten historical wrong. This repressed element, festering in the marginal spaces, eventually gathers strength and bursts forth to terrorize the comfortable center. The story then becomes a process of confronting this rejected shadow, forcing the characters, and by extension the reader, to acknowledge the darkness they had hoped to keep at bay. In this way, the ancient mythological structure of the shapeshifter at the gate provides a durable and endlessly adaptable framework. It allows writers to explore the most complex social anxieties about class, sexuality, and scientific progress, and the deepest psychological fears about our own hidden natures, all through the chillingly familiar tale of something from the outside getting in. This shamanic vision turns the entire concept of the border on its head. Where the community sees a line of defense, the shaman sees a bridge. In countless traditions, from the Siberian tundra to the Amazon rainforest, the shaman is the ultimate boundary crosser, a human who has learned to become a shapeshifter in their own right. Their profound spiritual journeys are not undertaken in the physical body, but in a fluid spirit form that can travel to the world's edge and beyond. To do this, they must be able to change, to wear the skin of a wolf to run with the pack, to become an eagle to see from the heights, or to take the form of a river to understand its flow. This shapeshifting is not a curse or a malicious deception. It is the highest form of spiritual literacy. It is the necessary skill for communicating with the powerful, non-human intelligences that dwell in the wild. The shaman acts as a diplomat for the entire village, a mediator who ventures into the chaotic unknown not to conquer it, but to converse with it. They negotiate for the return of game to the hunting grounds. They seek out the spiritual roots of an illness to bring healing, and they retrieve lost knowledge from the dream time to guide their people. In this worldview, the terrifying Leshy or the elusive Puka is not merely a monster to be feared, but a potential ally, a teacher, or a source of wisdom. The edge becomes a place of sacred commerce, a bustling intersection where vital resources, information, and power are exchanged between the human world and the spirit world. This reframes our oldest fears with a startling new possibility. The shapeshifter at the gate is not always an enemy. Sometimes it is an ambassador, and the greatest danger might not be in facing it, but in failing to recognize its true purpose. This shamanic perspective reveals that the boundary was never just a wall. It was a membrane, a permeable layer through which the entire community could breathe, learn, and survive. This precarious balance between sustenance and sacrilege plays out in the heart of the chase. The hunt was never just about food. It was a high-stakes ritual conducted on the spirit's own turf. A hunter pursuing a deer knew he was crossing from a world of human order into a domain governed by older, more fluid laws. This is why the most potent game in mythology is never just an animal. The white stag of Celtic and Slavic lore appears at the moment the forest grows thin, a creature of impossible beauty that seems to beckon the hunter deeper. It is the ultimate prey, but to follow it is to surrender your own agenda. The chase becomes a test, a labyrinth of the spirit. The stag never runs in a straight line. It leads the hunter through forgotten paths and across treacherous streams, stripping away his arrogance and his sense of control. If the hunter proves worthy, perhaps by showing restraint or compassion, the chase transforms into a guide, leading him to a hidden spring, a lost treasure, or a moment of profound personal revelation. But if he is driven by greed or pride, the pursuit ends only in a tangled thicket, with the hunter lost, empty-handed, and humbled by the wilderness he sought to conquer. This magical quarry is the shapeshifter in its most alluring form, a being that is both animal and spirit, both prey and teacher, perfectly embodying the dual nature of the hunt itself. For every story of a guiding stag, however, there exists a far darker counterpart, a spirit that does not lead but retaliates. When a hunter breaks the sacred covenant of the hunt, taking more than he needs or causing needless suffering, the guardian of the wild makes its presence known. This is not the trickster's playful riddle, but a shapeshifter's righteous fury. In the forests of Japan, if a hunter was wasteful or cruel, the Kodama, a spirit that inhabits ancient trees, could unleash a terrible curse. The very animals he sought might vanish, or he could be plagued by waking nightmares, haunted by the cries of his prey. The shapeshifter, in this role, becomes the collective voice of the forest, a force of natural justice that ensures the hunt remains an act of reverence, not mere plunder. This constant tension between the hunter as a seeker of wisdom and the hunter as a target of vengeance captures the essential ambiguity of our relationship with nature. We must enter the wild to survive, but we do so as guests in a kingdom that has its own, often unspoken, rules. The hunt, therefore, becomes the ultimate liminal activity, a journey where the confident provider can, in a single heartbeat, become the terrified quarry. Fear was not left to the imagination. It was hammered into iron and woven into the hedgerows. The profound belief in these liminal spirits compelled communities to build their anxieties directly into the landscape, transforming the abstract border into a physically fortified and spiritually defended line. A simple fence was never just a barrier for livestock, it was a declaration. The sturdy wooden post and rail marked the absolute end of the human domain, a clear statement to the wilderness that this far and no further. More potent still were the living walls of the hedgerow, especially those of thorny plants like hawthorn. These dense, tangled barriers were a masterpiece of practical and symbolic defense. They were difficult for any physical creature to penetrate, but their true power was believed to be spiritual. The thorns were thought to snag and tear at ethereal forms, preventing any malevolent, shapeless entity from drifting across the boundary. This was the first layer of a community's immune system, a living, growing rampart against the chaos of the unknown. The very act of maintaining this hedge was a ritual in itself, a repeated communal effort that reinforced the sacred importance of the line they defended. This need for protection did not stop at the edge of the village. It extended right up to the threshold of every home. The doorway, the ultimate personal border between the safe interior and the unpredictable outside world, became a focal point for the most potent defensive magic. A horseshoe nailed above the door, preferably with the ends pointing upward to hold in the good fortune, was a common sight across Europe. Its iron material was considered inherently pure and resistant to spiritual corruption, while its crescent shape echoed ancient symbols of protection. Similarly, a witch bottle was a more secretive but equally deliberate defense. This small bottle would be filled with sharp objects like pins and nails, along with personal items like urine or hair clippings, and then buried at the property's edge or beneath the hearth. It was a trap designed to attract and then painfully confuse any hostile spirit sent to cause harm, capturing its malevolent intent and neutralizing the threat before it could cross into the home. These apotropaic practices, a term meaning having the power to ward off evil, turned the home into a fortress and the village into a citadel. They materialized the myth, giving people a sense of active control over the terrifying forces they believed were just outside. This tangible response demonstrates a crucial truth about these ancient beliefs. They were not passive fears, but active blueprints for survival. The stories of shapeshifters directly shaped the physical world, influencing how our ancestors organized, built, and fortified their habitats against the perceived dangers lurking in the shadows at the edge of everything. That very question of a hidden self finds its voice in the quiet of the night. Our dreams are a private wilderness, a landscape where the familiar rules of identity are suspended. In this realm, the shapeshifter is not a monster we encounter, but a force we embody. We dream of flying like a bird, of running as a wolf, or of speaking with the voice of a stranger. These nocturnal transformations are a direct echo of the oldest mythological themes, a personal experience of the fluid self that our ancestors projected onto the spirits at the edge of the world. The subconscious mind, in its boundless creativity, becomes our personal shapeshifter, trying on different forms and scenarios to process the complexities of our waking lives. It is the ultimate liminal space, a threshold between our conscious identity and the vast, uncharted territory of our inner world. This is why so many cultures view dreams as messages from the other side, or as journeys taken by the soul in a form that is not bound by flesh. The dream is where we meet the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden, the capacities for change, for courage, or for fear that linger at the margins of our awareness. The ancient fear of a spirit that can wear a friend's face is, in a way, a premonition of our own potential for profound personal change. It reflects an uneasy understanding that the person we are today might not be the person we become tomorrow, and that the line between a benevolent neighbor and a hidden threat is not always drawn in the sand, but in the shifting sands of circumstance and choice. This introspective journey reveals that the most enduring power of the shapeshifter myth is its ability to hold up a dark, shimmering mirror, forcing us to ask not only what is lurking in the woods, but what is waiting within us. That internal wilderness is a landscape we all visit every night. Our dreams are the true subconscious edge of settlement, a private realm where the rigid self we present to the world dissolves into something far more fluid. Here, the shapeshifter is not an external monster we encounter, but a force we become. We dream of soaring like a bird, of running with a predator's instinct, or of speaking with the voice of a stranger. These nocturnal transformations are a direct echo of the oldest myths, a personal experience of the changing self that our ancestors projected onto the spirits at the village boundary. The subconscious mind, in its boundless creativity, becomes our personal trickster and guardian, trying on different forms to process the complexities and contradictions of our waking lives. This is the ultimate liminal space, a threshold between our conscious identity and the vast, uncharted territory of our inner world. It is why so many cultures view dreams as messages from the other side, or as journeys taken by the soul in a form not bound by flesh. Just as a community feared what lurked beyond the firelight, the conscious ego often fears what might emerge from these depths. The unsettling figures that populate our nightmares, the chasers whose faces we cannot see, the loved ones who act with alien malice, these are the psychological equivalents of the leshy or the puka. They are the manifestations of repressed anxieties, unresolved conflicts, and instincts we have pushed to the very edge of our awareness. The myth of the shapeshifter, then, is not just a story about external monsters. It is a profound narrative about our internal psychological landscape. The journey to the physical edge of the village becomes a metaphor for the courageous act of looking inward. The monster we must confront at the border is rarely a simple beast. It is a distorted reflection of a part of ourselves we have tried to exile. This challenges a purely literal interpretation of these ancient tales. They were never just about the danger in the woods. They were a sophisticated, symbolic language for exploring the danger and the potential within the human psyche. The shape-shifting spirit is the embodiment of our own capacity for profound change, for hidden desires, and for the parts of our nature that do not fit neatly into the orderly story we tell about ourselves. The search for a literal Bigfoot in the woods or a physical dogman haunting a lonely road fundamentally misunderstands their purpose. These figures are not biological puzzles waiting to be solved by a camera trap or a DNA test. They are narrative vessels crafted over generations to carry the weight of questions that science alone cannot answer. To view them as merely undiscovered animals is to mistake the map for the territory, focusing on the potential creature while ignoring the vast psychological landscape it was created to inhabit. These stories were never failed attempts at zoology. They were profoundly successful attempts at giving form to the formless. The fear of the other, the anxiety about a changing world, the very definition of who belongs inside the community and who must remain outside. These are abstract, complex human experiences. The shapeshifter at the edge is the perfect symbolic container for all of them. It embodies the other in its most potent and terrifying form, a being that is not just different from us, but one that can deceptively mimic us, challenging the very foundations of our identity. This is not a literal threat you can shoot. It is a philosophical challenge you must navigate. The stories provide a safe, symbolic space to explore the chaos of change, the pain of betrayal, and the terror of the unknown, all while keeping those destabilizing forces contained at a safe distance from the hearth. When we embrace this symbolic lens, the entire myth transforms from a simple campfire tale into a deep, enduring work of collective human imagination. It becomes a conversation across centuries about what it means to be human in a vast and often incomprehensible world. A conversation that continues every time we feel a chill on a dark road or wonder what moves just beyond the tree line. The Japanese kappa lurking in a riverbed and the Scottish kelpie waiting in a loch have never met, yet they share a haunting family resemblance. One is a water imp known for challenging travelers to a wrestling match, the other a shape-shifting horse that drags the unwary to a watery resting place. They are separated by an entire world of culture and geography, yet they answer to the same deep psychological calling. When we place these myths side by side, a stunning pattern of reflection emerges. Across every continent, humanity has independently conjured the same kinds of beings for the same kinds of places. The river spirit, the forest guardian, the crossroads trickster, these are not random inventions. They are recurring answers to a set of universal human questions. This points toward something far deeper than cultural exchange. It suggests that our fear of the ambiguous entity at the boundary is as fundamental to the human experience as language or storytelling itself. We are wired to map our world with these symbolic landmarks. The presence of a deceptive water spirit in both Japan and Scotland is not a coincidence. It is evidence of a shared cognitive architecture, a common way that the human mind processes the threat and the promise of a liminal space. Water is universally a source of life and a place of profound danger. It is a highway for trade and a barrier to crossing. It is clear on the surface but opaque in its depths. It makes perfect sense, then, that cultures everywhere would populate this vital, ambiguous threshold with a being that embodies its dual nature, a creature that is both playful and perilous, that can offer a blessing or deliver a curse. This comparative view does not erase the beautiful uniqueness of each culture's stories. Instead, it weaves them into a grander, more interconnected tapestry. It reveals that while the specific names and forms of these spirits are wonderfully diverse, the underlying human experiences they represent, the fear of the unknown, the need for social cohesion, the negotiation with nature, are profoundly the same. We have always used stories to draw maps of the world, and it seems we have all been drawing the same mysterious symbols at the very edges. Our ancient forests have found a startling new form in the glow of a screen. The modern edge of settlement is no longer marked by a stone wall or a dark wood, but by the login prompt to an unmoderated forum or the anonymous browser window accessing the deep recesses of the web. These digital spaces are the ultimate contemporary liminal zones, places where physical location is meaningless, real names are optional, and identity becomes a costume one can put on or take off in an instant. Here, in the borderlands of our connected society, new myths have taken root. The hacker is a modern trickster, a boundary crosser who can slip through digital fences we assumed were secure, not to steal gold but to expose vulnerabilities we never knew we had. The catfisher is a different kind of shapeshifter, crafting an entire persona to lure and deceive, proving that the old fear of a spirit wearing a friendly face has found a powerful new medium. These entities thrive in the ambiguity of the digital wilderness, where it is nearly impossible to separate a person's true intentions from the mask they choose to wear. The core human anxiety, however, remains unchanged. It is the fear of the intelligent, ambiguous threat that can bypass our physical gates and infiltrate the perceived safety of our community, now our social networks and digital homes. We build firewalls and complex passwords as our new apotropaic magic, our digital horseshoes and witch bottles, in an endless effort to keep the chaotic unknown at bay. This seamless transition of an ancient mythological framework into the 21st century proves its profound and enduring power. The stories we tell about the dangers at the periphery are not fading. They are simply evolving, providing us with a familiar narrative compass to navigate the terrifying and exhilarating new frontiers of the human experience. Ultimately, the shape-shifting spirit at the edge of settlement is far more than a simple monster story. It is a profound cultural artifact, a mirror reflecting our timeless relationship with the unknown. These myths gave tangible form to the formless anxieties that live in the space between the village fire and the deep woods, transforming a vague sense of dread into a being you could potentially outwit, appease, or understand. They were a fundamental tool for community building, reinforcing the social contract by personifying the dangers of straying from the group. The fear of the deceptive spirit lurking just beyond the fence was a powerful incentive to uphold the rules and trust your neighbors, strengthening the bonds that held the community together against the chaos outside. And perhaps most powerfully, these fluid beings speak to the fluid nature of our own identities. They are ancient, externalized stories about the transformations we all undergo, the parts of ourselves we keep at the margins, and the constant, unsettling process of change that defines a human life. The next time you find yourself at a border, whether it is a physical line on a map, the start of a new chapter in your life, or a moment of profound personal decision, remember these ancient stories. Consider what the Trickster, the Guardian, and the Shapeshifter reveal about the enduring landscape of the human mind, a place where our oldest fears and our greatest potential for growth have always met at the very edge of everything we know. If these ideas resonated with you, we would love to hear about the local myths from your own part of the world. Share stories of the border spirits and threshold guardians you know in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the heart of historical mysteries.